Welcome to the High Tea with Grace podcast, where we spill the tea on HIT. Today, I'm honored to welcome Cheryl Field. Thanks for joining me, Cheryl.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Grace. It's a pleasure to be here. It's so exciting.
I know. So we're here live at the PointClickCare Summit. And so tell me a little bit about the role that you play at PointClickCare and about the career path that brought you to your role today.
Grace, I'm a principal product manager in the artificial intelligence team, which really just means that I have this amazing privilege to contribute as a nurse and a product leader to the machine learning and large language platforms that we're really utilizing to solve problems with today. It's a bit of a unique role for nursing, and yet it really shouldn't be a unique role. I started out, like many nurses, I started out in acute care. Right out of nursing school, I went into acute rehabilitation. I actually specialize in rehabilitation for the first 17 years of my career, certifying as a rehabilitation registered nurse. And at that time, rehabilitation was thought to happen in an acute hospital or at home. And it was just beginning to embark into the skilled nursing space where you could have a blend of both acuity, that subacute, really sick patient who also needed physical occupational speech therapy in order to get back home. I found that I thrived in that setting, in that I got to know my patient for 4 to 6 weeks. It wasn't as quick through the ED or quick through
in the door, out the door.
Yeah, those things really bothered me. I really loved getting to know the patient and the family, and the realization that they were changing the way they lived their life because of this sudden change in their health. And it was really a unique opportunity to impact that. So I was doing that for 17 years when I had a wonderful opportunity to co-present with, at the time, a startup. And as a nurse who was doing rehab and talking about restorative nursing, I met an organization that wanted to help beginning the digitization of rehab care and the cleaning up of that data that nursing homes were starting to put their MDS assessments into a file and submitting to the government. And so I moved into clinical informatics about 25 years ago. And it's just been an amazing career that I could never have imagined when I first applied to the wrong college and ended up in the University of Rochester when I thought I was applying to Rochester Institute of Technology. And so I ended up in a nursing program at the most amazing school for nursing, which was somewhat of an accident, but really a perfect accident.
That's awesome. And I just love the nurse to informaticist career path. It's so important and fascinating to me in the healthcare industry, in the healthcare space. And I want to just kind of dive into some of your thoughts on AI. Here at the summit, you're talking about AI. And I'm wondering, from your perspective as a nurse informaticist, what are the biggest challenges in integrating AI responsibly into clinical workflows without disrupting patient care?
Yeah, you use some incredibly important words. You use the word of workflow, integration, responsible, and I'll say clinicians. We really can't do in healthcare. I don't believe we can do a great job leveraging this technology and leveraging the digitized data that we've spent 20 years amassing if we don't involve clinicians. So for every clinician listening, lean in hard. When someone calls you and invites you, come into that space. And the reason I say that is that language models and machine learning models and really smart scientists, they need the subject matter expertise, one, to validate the problem they're trying to solve, but also to make sure they're solving it, as you said, in the right place of the workflow. So where is the nurse in that decision-making process that we want to augment, add to that decision with surfaced up analytics that can help them to make the best decision and to really direct their interventions going forward? Where will I assess? Where will I surveil based on not just only what this model has said, but the other data that I as a clinician have collected through my shift as I come into this moment in this space? And I think that when we do that, we do it in a way, and again, we'll talk about responsible by definition, but we do it in a way that nurses will come to trust these kinds of assistive algorithms and use them. They're no good if they're not used, and they're no good if the nurse doesn't trust it. And to earn that trust, we sort of back into some of these definitions around responsible AI, which is being very transparent, around the data sourcing, the data bias. How did we train this model? How did you actually build it? What is it good at? What is it maybe not so good at? And giving full transparency to the user, just like you would any other tool that you go to the hardware store and you're going to buy a really fancy souped up tool. You know how it works and what its capacity is. And so I think that that's so important as the technology is all abuzz. My fear, of course, is that there's going to be sales reps who are knocking on the doors of hospital administrators and that nurses' voices aren't at that executive table when someone says, hey, you should buy this. It's all AI and your nurses should use it.
That goes perfect into my next question that I have for you, which is how can AI be designed to enhance rather than replace nurse expertise? And especially when it comes to critical areas like decision support, documentation, patient monitoring, and other things, how is it best designed to make sure it's enhancing their experience as a nurse?
I think that the importance of recognizing that training, there's so many similarities between how we train a nurse and how we train a model. And we can say, I told the joke about my nursing school. Like where I went to school mattered. I was trained at a very good university. The University of Rochester is a strong memorial hospital, a teaching hospital, just well known for the clinicians that it produces. And so training matters. When I went to that school, I was given a set of answers. And those answers have come from best practice. And if we really think about the speed at which in healthcare we learn, it's very slow. In the old conference, research paper, journal, think about this. That's so slow, right? Now if we respect the principles of training and we fast forward to leveraging technology that can read all the articles, right? Like it can gather all the information, gather the intelligence, put it in one place, summarize. We can speed up that rate at which we cycle and that rate at which we can become more best practice. So how you train your model matters. What are the right answers? Just like when I went to nursing school, I learned those right answers and I got into practice and I constantly would go into a room, look at a human, compare what I was seeing to the right answer. And to be honest with you, the decision I make as a nurse, it's really a prediction. If you think about it, Grace, when we make a decision, we're predicting. I shared with you, I'll be back in 2 minutes because I was going to run off to the restroom. Well, here at Summit, it's more than 2 minutes to the restroom. I wasn't accurate in my prediction and how long it would take me to get there and to come back. So I made a decision that I learned through my experience that it was 2 minutes longer than I had predicted, right? A decision is just a prediction. The forward data teaches me if I was right or wrong. This is exactly what is true with a machine learning model. We train it on data. And when we use clinicians to give input to what are the right responses, now we're leveraging, again, a nurse has been trained in their craft and knows what they're doing. We utilize their expertise as subject matter experts to train a model. And now that model knows what the right answers are. So you see, in the absence of a clinician's involvement, the models we build would be very wrong. So nurse involvement here, like what I get to do and other nurses that we bring into the fold is critical in the success of an accurate model, even coming into market. Now, once it gets to market, it needs to be tested. That decision, that prediction the model makes, nurses will give feedback on and nurses will test. So I think you asked an amazing question, which is how we help support. I want to support the agency nurse, or the nurse who's been off for a week, or the nurse who floated from one floor to another, they don't know the patients. They don't have the luxury of time to go read these reams of digitized information that technology's allowed us to accumulate. And yet, if they leverage a tool like a language model that can summarize what's gone on for the last 7 days and extract that language, just give the nurse a little heads up. Here's what your colleagues have been writing about for the last 7 days. That nurse knows it's not everything, right? They're still assessing in their shift. They're still doing their own interview and talking with families, and they have their own expertise and experience. All of that comes into that situation. But I think these kinds of technologies can better position every nurse for a more successful decision in the care moment, which you only know if it's the right decision when you collect future data. I mean, that's true for every prediction and decision that we make. And we're not always going to get it right, but we're going to get it right more often. I think we can reduce the fatigue for nurses and that cognitive burden. If you get a 6-digit numeric passcode, you have to remember. Well, I'm getting good at those, but it's actually really hard to remember what was on the previous screen compared to this screen. And when we can use technology to bring that information together, make sense of it, help us to see kind of the poignant elements of that data, that reduces that cognitive load for that human. And it makes what you're doing just feel easier.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. Now, I know at Summit here, you're talking about responsible AI. So I have to ask you, what is responsible AI? What is your definition of that? And how can we be better at that?
Yeah. So, and I didn't come with those responsible definitions, although I'm quite happy to say that we first launched a machine learning model into commercial availability back in October of 2022 before the current buzz. I mean, it was buzzing, but it wasn't like humming buzzing like it is now. And even then, when we guided our work, we guided ourselves with ethics. As a clinician, I was like, well, no, I think we should do this. It should make sense. We should get nurse feedback. We should make it easily understandable. We should use language and so those are some of the principles that come in with someone like the Office of National Coordination, ONC, HTI-1 rule that really does say, hey, if you're an organization that is putting these models into practice and you're certified with us, here is the standard of information sharing we expect of you. Everything from at the moment you enable a product, I need to let you know as the enabler, hey, there's a machine learning model or there's an evidence-based model here or a predictive model in this product. Just at the point of enablement, that information. The second piece I really talk about is source criteria. How did you train this thing? Who did it? What is it good at? Like we mentioned before. And when you have a evidence-based model, cite that evidence. What research are you leveraging to kind of automate some of this thinking for nurses? In the case of a predictive model, ONC has us actually list and define how we are reducing the risk, what interventions we take as an organization to reduce and mitigate risk of models not being accurate. And no model is going to be accurate for everyone, just like no nurse's or physician's decision is going to be accurate for everyone. But being able to be transparent around your model bias, the size of the data set, where it works well, where it may not work well, where you've shown accuracy, just so that others know that it may not work in a subpopulation that they're trying to test it out on. It doesn't mean it's good for everyone. And that risk mitigation, how we monitor the model, how we actually communicate to our customer if there's any concern or inaccuracy is all part of that intervention risk management process that organizational bodies like NIST or ONC really help us to put some governance around what we mean when we say, hey, be responsible. It's not just ethics. It really involves organization-wide some intention around how we will invest, utilize, implement, train, deploy this kind of technology to our customers with our ultimate goal of improving patient care, our ultimate goal of enhancing the quality of care that our providers can provide. Because I've been in analytics for 25 years, and I've said this so many times, behind every graph, every chart, every data point, it's just someone's mom or dad. It's a person. And we want to get right by that person. So I think there's stay grounded in human ethics, but look to the literature for what it really means to deliver it responsibly. You'll get acronyms like FAVES, which help us with making sure models are fair and appropriate and validated and effective. And so these kinds of words you'll hear time and time again. But really, there's a lot of actions that organizations will take to be that transparent.
Fascinating. So interesting. Now, I've heard in the industry that some nurses worry that AI could lead to more administrative burden. And you kind of mentioned that a little bit in an answer in the earlier. But, how can we ensure that AI and responsible AI actually reduces cognitive overload instead of adding to it?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question around a tool that would feel burdensome versus a supportive tool. And I think what happens in that space is, from my perspective, sometimes that's fear and litigation. So if I have a predictive model, what actions would be expected to be taken from that risk? Now, what if those actions aren't documented? Then the outcome happens. You end up in a litigious situation. And on discovery, someone's saying, well, you had this predictive model, you didn't action. And so for me, I remind myself of two things. One is that in the absence of that model, you're still accountable and responsible for assessment, care planning, and outcomes of care. So I don't feel that not having a tool abolishes you of responsibility. You're going to still be responsible. I actually think that leveraging these kinds of technologies helps everyone increase their clinical acumen, their index of suspicion, and really just continues that training of nurses or reminders of nurses that where there's a comprehensive assessment that might need to be done. So I do think that we're going to have to embrace those uncomfortable conversations of people suggesting that this might create work. I think a perfect model just utilizes data that already is existing in the normal course of care. I wouldn't want to have to take new data from clinicians. That is burdensome. And I think there's ways that we reduce that burden and cognitive load. Like I gave an example. When I come in to report to a shift, I kind of need to know what's been going on for the last week. And the only way I could do that is read my colleagues' notes. I could go ask the patient, how have you been? But we know that patients aren't great historians. Like whatever's happening right now seems to have consumed their history, as opposed to, I might have a headache today, but you might hear that it's this big headache when yesterday they actually didn't have a headache at all. But right now it's very consuming. So to get that whole historical perspective, you look to your colleague's voice. And that would be, maybe I'm going through the notes or the documentation that's in the chart for that human. A model that could do some of that and summarize could at least shortcut that for me. And I could start with some search points. And if I think too, it's not an opportunity for nurses to leverage and build on that information. But maybe I'm, like you said, I don't know that patient, or I'm from an agency and I don't know the history. I get more insights. That reduces my burden, increases my efficiency, increases the likelihood that I'm going to get those things right. And I think that brings the voice of other colleagues sort of into the ear of that nurse who's showing up. And the more we can do to help support the pace and the information overload that nurses are facing with either short summaries, predictive models, whether they're chatbots that say, oh, it looks like you're trying to do this. You might want to do this, this, and this. Those kinds of tools, which are really coming, I think are exciting to think about. As get the nurse's hands off the keyboard.
And looking ahead, thinking on that, what are some innovations that are exciting you? And also, what are some best practices that you'd recommend for healthcare organizations looking to implement and oversee their AI processes within their organizations?
The future is so exciting. And I actually shared this comment earlier today, but I think that there's a world without a keyboard. And when my keyboard is really extinct, that means that I'm interacting with my technology like a human, and it's able to interact back with me, and I don't have to input. So that could be everything from a nurse doing an assessment with ambient technology that's helping to create that note. I know we have this today, but when you think of that on steroids, to where a director of nursing can come in the morning on a Monday and say, hey, Cheryl was admitted over the weekend. Give me a quick summary of Cheryl. What should I be concerned? What are the driving issues? And ask those kinds of questions and re-ask questions of your PointClickCare assistant if you can do. I think it's just hard to imagine. It's so exciting what that world looks like and the efficiencies that can bring. And we're not going to get there overnight. So the second part of your question, and I said it earlier, is really to get clinicians to lean in. I want clinicians to really ask questions. What data did you use to train this model? What does it do well? What does it get wrong? How will I know it's accurate? How much information around whatever it's predicting or summarizing or sharing, how can I see that in source? I want to be able to go right to that and see the words my colleague wrote, and not something that a language model has hallucinated, created on its own, but to source right to those notes. So I would say to clinicians that say yes. When someone like me calls and says, hey, would you like to test with us? Would you like to do some labeling with us? Would you like to get involved? We're thinking about this problem and we're thinking we might solve that with this kind of technology, but we would need subject matter expertise help. Say yes. Say yes in those moments. That's really an essential role. And I've been doing some talks within my organization, a little bit outside of my organization. I work with a group called Power Up Nursing and on their advisory board. And if you really think about the nurse cohort, an international nurse cohort, this cohort in this country, I want nurses asking questions about these AIs before they test them in workflow. I want you to say yes, but I want you to know what questions to ask. And I think those are sort of spilling the tea, to use your motto, on really getting curious before we say yes. We'll say yes and to how we'll test and implement so that we have the right model at the right time in the workflow, getting the right results and the right outcome. And we're not breaking that down the trust of the nurses. If you introduce the wrong model in the workflow and the nurses don't trust it, they'll never use it. And that doesn't mean the model doesn't have potential. It means that, how you got it's you're learning, right? You never fail, you learn, you iterate. And so say yes to those folks who are like myself, working in product. We cannot do it without you. We can't do it well without our customers' voice. And I want the voice of senior care loud and clear in these model works, because I think that that's a space where efficiency is highly demanding. And I think it's also ripe for leveraging this technology. Forgive me for saying it this way. We're not in the ICU where microseconds matter. We're in the continuum of healthcare where days and hours matter and changes occur from today to tomorrow, and seeing those changes early matter. And I think this technology can really surface that to the clinicians who can have an inside peek into changes that machines can see with algorithms and their cognitive ability that our human brain just simply can't compute. And so I'm excited about leveraging in that space, making it easier. Nurses like myself who always loved working in that rehab space, 4 to 5 weeks with families, really seeing people get back on their feet and the passion of nursing. Heck yeah, let's leverage AI in that space and really showcase what we are in the healthcare community and the healthcare continuum, because it's essential. You don't get back home. It's like the landing of a plane. If you don't land smooth, everyone talks about that bumpy landing coming into Vegas, right? But a smooth landing is like a great rehab program. You get back home and it feels great. And I think that this is a great space for leveraging that for the nurses that care in this sector.
Well, I just love you. You are so amazing to learn from, and I appreciate you sharing your insights with us. And my listeners really like to get to know the people that I interview. They like to know about how you stay on top of your game. They want to know about the industry, but they also want to know about you. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do in your personal life? You're a busy for working professional to work your best and make a difference. What kind of habits do you have that keep you on the top of your game?
Well, one habit that I've had for many years, and I'm just blessed, that I wake up most days, depending on the time of year, with a bit of a sunrise coming in through my bedroom windows. And I have a habit of meditating. So, the alarm goes off. I'm not really a snoozer, but I do snooze. But during that snooze, I actually envision my day going well. I think about what this moment would be, and I imagine it going well. And I do that from exercise to meals to customer meetings. You're correct that I have raised 3 children. I've been the caregiver and advocate for seniors who lived right in my home. I wrote a book in 2023 called Prepared, a Healthcare Guide for Aging Adults, really based on those lessons learned and the stories of being both an inside expert and then advocating and ushering my own family through senior care and being like, wait, there's a huge disconnect here. And so for me to take care of myself and to do all of those things, I have always really thought sleep was important. I've known that as a nurse, to get good sleep. Can't always do it when you're raising children. But in this season of my life at age 58, envisioning the day going well is always a great start. I do movement, any kind of movement. I talk a lot about movement for health in seniors. People ask me how much and how often. I say, yes, all of it. So a little micro dancing in your kitchen? Yes. An extra set of stairs? Yes. Can't go up the stairs, go up one and go back down one using the rail. That's great movement. And so movement is important for me. And just recently, I think if you listen to some of the conversations that I see coming forth from the medical community, Dr. Casey Means, Dr. Phil Avadia, that are really talking about the role nutrition is playing in our health. And I've been a person who I've been heavy since I was like literally 8, 9 years old. I was like on keto at 9 and always overweight, always struggled with my weight. I've recently been successful with intermittent fasting and really increasing the time between dinner and my first meal. And I've been able to actually lower my own serum insulin, which again, if listeners in the healthcare space, even as a nurse with a master's in nursing, no one ever said, hey, let's get your insulin checked. We always looked at our fasting blood glucose and said, oh, it's good. Mine's always been good. In the last 10 years, I went through menopause. I really put on more weight. And I thought, oh, I must be insulin resistant without even knowing what that means. I don't think. And so I've been able to not only feel better from an inflammation and joint feeling, but take off weight and lower my serum insulin, which I know reduces my risk for cancer, for dementia, for obesity, for heart disease. I think there needs to be more conversation about food, what we eat, when we eat it, and our overall health. I messaged my physician and I said, insulin resistance is real, but I didn't need a drug. I needed to time my meals and eat differently and really feel better. It gives me the energy that I need to do a full day's worth of work. Having an empty nest also helps. I always tell people, that doesn't suck like I thought it was going to. My children are all pretty much grown and gone. Gives you that time back, that precious morning time for a routine. You'll get there.
Maybe one day. Who knows? I'm in the thick of it right now. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Where can our listeners find you online?
Well, on LinkedIn, Cheryl Field is really a great place to find me professionally. And I do have a website, www.cherylfield.com. I was named after, if I was a boy, I would have been Charlie. So I got the CH version of Cheryl. And yeah, I would love to have people connect with me. I do a lot of advocacy work for nursing. And so nurses, please connect with me. Seniors, please connect with me. And anyone who's really interested in helping us to move forward this very important narrative around responsible AI. Nurses are a linchpin in the success of that. And so please get connected with me so that I can amplify your voice and you can help to amplify mine.
Too good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's just
Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks to you folks for joining us too. Check out the High Tea with Grace podcast for more interviews with great guests like Cheryl today. Cheers.
Like a Girl Media is more than a media network. It's a community. We want to meet you and amplify your voice and the voices of outstanding women innovating in healthcare. Interested in starting your own podcast or hosting an event near you? Connect with us online or in person. We're here to support and empower you.